Let me ask you something. When was the last time you smiled and felt it reach your eyes? Not because you were okay, but because you were pretending to be. Because some of the deepest pain doesn't come from what happened, it comes from what changed inside you afterward. You didn't just lose a person, you lost trust, you lost certainty. You lost the version of yourself that believed people would handle your heart with care. And here's the part no one talks about. You can survive the moment of betrayal, abandonment, or heartbreak. But what quietly destroys people is what comes after. The sleepless nights, the overthinking. The way one memory can hijack your entire day. The way your guard goes up, even with people who haven't done anything wrong. You don't talk about it much. You function, you show up, but inside something feels fractured, and you start asking questions you never had to ask before. Why did this hurt so much? Why can't I just move on? What's wrong with me? Let me be clear, there is nothing wrong with you. What you're experiencing is what happens when a good heart is hit hard. The problem isn't that you feel deeply. The problem is that no one ever taught you how to heal deeply, because healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's not about becoming numb, and it's definitely not about pretending you're strong while falling apart in silence. Healing is about learning how to carry what hurt you without letting it control you. And if you stay with me, you're going to understand something powerful. Why this pain changed you, why it feels so heavy, and how to come out of it stronger, calmer, and unbreakable, without losing who you are, because this moment, right now, this might be the beginning of the strongest version of you there is. A moment after you've been hurt deeply when you realize something unsettling. The pain isn't just something you feel anymore, it's something you're carrying. It follows you into quiet moments. It shows up in your tone, your patience, your reactions, and if you're not careful, it begins to shape how you see yourself and how you see the world. That's where the real danger is, because pain has a W, A of convincing you that it is permanent, that this is just who you are now, more guarded, more distant, less open, less hopeful, and slowly, without realizing it, you stop saying I was hurt and start saying I am hurt. That shift seems small, but it changes everything. Accepting the wound does not mean surrendering your identity to it. Most people think healing means pushing the pain away, staying busy, distracting themselves, or forcing positivity, but avoidance doesn't heal anything. It just delays the moment when the pain demands to be acknowledged. What you resist doesn't disappear, it waits. And it waits patiently until you're tired, alone, or vulnerable enough for it to resurface. Acceptance is different. Acceptance is the discipline of facing the truth without letting it consume you. It's the ability to sit with discomfort and say, yes, this hurt me. Yes, this changed me. And no, it does not get to define me. That requires courage. Because when you accept the wound, you stop running from the memories. You stop arguing with reality. You stop telling yourself it shouldn't have happened or that you should be over it by now. You allow yourself to feel the weight of it, not to drown in it, but to understand it. Pain wants to be witnessed. When it's ignored, it turns into anger. When it's suppressed, it becomes resentment. When it's denied, it shows up in your body, in your relationships, in the way you react to things that don't deserve that level of intensity. But when pain is acknowledged, it begins to loosen its grip. Here's the key distinction you have. To understand, feeling pain does not make you weak. Staying trapped in it does. There is nothing wrong with grieving what you lost. The person, the trust, the version of yourself that existed before the hurt. What becomes dangerous is when grief turns into identity, when every decision you make is filtered through what happened to you, when every new opportunity is met with suspicion, when disagreement feels like a threat. That's when the wound stops being something you experienced and starts becoming something you live as. And the longer that goes on, the harder it is to remember who you were before the hurt. Not because that person is gone, but because you've buried them under layers of protection and pain. You don't heal by erasing the past, you heal by placing it where it belongs. The past is a chapter, not the title of your life. Acceptance means telling the truth about what happened without dramatizing it or minimizing it. It means saying, this mattered, this hurt, and I'm allowed to take the time I need to process it. But it also means recognizing when pain is no longer informing you, it's controlling you. And control is what pain wants, unprocessed pain. wants to be in charge of your reactions. It wants to decide how close you let people get. It wants to dictate how you interpret silence, tone, and intention. It turns neutral moments into threats and minor disappointments into confirmations of your worst fears. That's how people become hardened without realizing it. Not because they're cruel, but because they're wounded, accepting the wound requires honesty, but it also requires restraint. You don't rehearse the story endlessly. You don't build your personality around what happened. You don't collect sympathy or validation as a substitute for healing. At some point, revisiting the pain stops being productive and starts being self-sabotage. There is a difference between processing and ruminating. Processing leads to understanding. Ruminating keeps you stuck in the same emotional loop. One moves you forward. The other reinforces the wound. Ask yourself this quietly and honestly: is thinking about this bringing clarity, or is it just reopening the injury? Acceptance also means letting go of the fantasy that things could have been different if only you had said something else, noticed something earlier, or tried harder. That of thinking feels responsible, but it's actually punishing. It traps you in a version of the past that no longer exists and steals energy from the present where healing happens. You did the best you could with what you knew at the time. That truth doesn't erase the pain, but it releases the self-blame that keeps it alive. One of the most powerful steps in healing is learning to separate what happened to you from who you are. What happened was an event. Who you are is a living, evolving human being with agency, strength, and the ability to choose what comes next. You are not the betrayal. You are not the rejection. You are not the loss. You are the one who lived through it. And there is strength in that, even if it doesn't feel like it yet. Acceptance is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with sudden relief or dramatic breakthroughs. It shows up in small moments, when you stop explaining yourself to people who don't need to understand. When you notice the pain rising and choose not to act from it. When you allow yourself to feel sadness without attaching a story of hopelessness to it. That's how you accept the wound without becoming the wound. You honor the experience without letting it dominate your future. You acknowledge the pain without building your identity around it. You remember what happened, but you don't live there. And over time, something shifts. The pain doesn't vanish, but it loses authority. It becomes information instead of a command. A memory instead of a sentence. A reminder of what you've survived, not a prediction of what why. Lose again. That's when healing begins to feel real. Not because the wound is gone, but because it no longer owns you. When you've been hurt deeply, one of the first things that disappears is your sense of control. Not just over the situation, but over yourself. Your thoughts feel scattered. Your emotions come in waves without warning. One moment you're functioning, the next you're overwhelmed by a memory, a feeling, or a sudden tightness in your chest that you can't explain. And the most frustrating part is this: you didn't choose any of it. That loss of control is often more destabilizing than the pain itself. The mind searches for something to grab onto, something to stabilize the chaos, and when it can't find anything solid, it starts trying to control everything: other people, outcomes, conversations, the future. That's when anxiety takes over. That's when you replay conversations, anticipate rejection, brace for impact before anything even happens. But healing doesn't begin by controlling the world around you. It begins by regaining control of the few things that are still within your reach, and those things matter more than you realize. You can't control what happened. You can't control how someone treated you, what they chose or what they failed to give you. You can't control whether they regret it or understand the damage they caused. Trying to manage those things will exhaust you and keep you emotionally tethered to the very pain you're trying to escape. But you can control how you show up now. You can control what you do when your thoughts start spiraling. You can control how you care for your body when your emotions feel heavy. You can control the structure of your days, even when your inner world feels unstable. This is where discipline quietly becomes a form of self-respect. When everything feels out of control, routine becomes an anchor, not because routine is exciting, but because it's predictable, and predictability calms the nervous system. Waking up at the same time each day, moving your body even when motivation is low, eating regular meals, going to bed with intention. These aren't small things. They send a message to your brain that you are safe, that you are capable, that you are not falling apart even if it feels that way internally. Your body listens before your mind does. When your emotions are chaotic, logic won't always reach them. But consistent action will. Physical movement releases tension your mind doesn't have words for. Deep breathing slows a racing heart. Proper rest restores resilience you didn't know you were losing. These are not cliches, they are physiological truths. Control what you can in the physical realm, and the emotional realm begins to stabilize. Another place to reclaim control is why. Our attention. Pain wants your focus. It wants to replay itself, to analyze itself, to justify itself. Left unchecked, it will occupy every quiet moment. That doesn't mean you suppress it, but it does mean you decide when and how much space it gets. You are allowed to say, not right now. When a thought shows up uninvited, you don't have to follow it. You don't have to finish the story it's try. Sell you. You can acknowledge it and redirect your attention to something grounding. Your breath, your surroundings, the task in front of you. That choice may feel small, but repeated over time, it rebuilds your sense of agency. You stop feeling like a hostage to your own mind. Control also means setting boundaries, especially when you're vulnerable. After being hurt, your tolerance is low. Your emotional reserves are limited. Not everyone deserves access to you during this phase of healing, and that's not selfish, it's strategic. You don't have to explain yourself to everyone. You don't have to engage in conversations that drain you. You don't have to reopen wounds just to make others comfortable. Choosing who you give your energy to is one of the most powerful ways to restore control. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is step back. There's also control in choosing your inputs. What you watch, what you listen to, what you read, these things shape your inner landscape. Constant exposure to negativity, comparison, or emotional triggers will keep your nervous system on high alert. Healing requires moments of quiet, neutrality, and even boredom. It requires space for your system to recalibrate. Peace doesn't arrive on its own. You create the conditions for it. It's important to understand that regaining control doesn't mean eliminating emotion. You will still have days when the pain feels closer, heavier, louder. Control doesn't mean you never break down. It means that when you do, you know how to bring yourself back. You learn your own warning signs. The tension in your jaw, the restlessness, the irritability, and instead of ignoring them, you respond. You slow down. You ground yourself. You choose rest over reaction. That is self-leadership. One of the most empowering shifts happens when you stop asking, why do I feel like this? And start asking, what do I need right now? The first question keeps you in the past. The second brings you into the present. And healing lives in the present. Sometimes what you need is structure. Sometimes it's solitude. Sometimes it's movement. Sometimes it's reaching out to someone safe. Control is knowing the difference and honoring it. And here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Waiting to feel better before taking control rarely works. Action often comes before relief. You don't get disciplined because you feel strong. You feel strong because you practice discipline. Each small act of control builds evidence that you are capable, that you are resilient, that you are not at the mercy of what happened to you. Over time, that evidence adds up. You start to trust yourself again, not because life is predictable, but because you are. You know that even when things fall apart, you can ground yourself, stabilize, and move forward with intention. That's how you rebuild control, not by fixing everything at once, but by mastering what's in front of you. And when you do that consistently, something powerful happens. The world may still be uncertain, the past may still exist, but you no longer feel like you're being pulled under. You're standing again, grounded, present, capable, and that is the foundation of real healing. One of the most painful traps after being hurt deeply is the belief that healing is waiting on something outside of you. An apology, an explanation, a moment where the other person finally understands what they did and how much it affected you. You tell yourself that once that happens, we'll feel better, lighter, at peace. But that moment often never comes. And even when it does, it rarely gives you what you think it will. The illusion of closure is seductive because it feels logical. Of course it makes sense to want answers. Of course it feels fair to want acknowledgement. You invested time, trust, emotion. Wanting resolution is human. But when your healing depends on someone else's awareness, remorse, or maturity, you hand your power to the very person who hurt you. And that's a dangerous place to live. The truth is, not everyone has the capacity to reflect honestly on their actions. Some people avoid accountability because it threatens their self-image. Some rewrite history to protect their ego. Some simply move on without ever looking back, waiting for closure. Them keeps you emotionally tied to someone who may never meet you where you are. And that attachment keeps the wound open. You replay conversations in your head, imagining what you would say if you ever had the chance. You draft messages you never send. You imagine scenarios where they finally admit the truth, finally see your worth, finally apologize in a way that feels complete. And each you're pulled back into the past. That mental loop feels active, but it's actually stagnation. Closure doesn't come from answers. It comes from acceptance. Acceptance that what happened happened. Acceptance that you may never fully understand why someone did what they did. Acceptance that their behavior says more about them than it does about you. This kind of acceptance isn't passive or it's decisive. It's the moment you stop trying to extract meaning from someone else's actions and start defining your own. You don't need their explanation to move forward. You need your decision. Reclaiming your power begins when you recognize that you've been waiting for them to change, waiting for clarity, waiting for validation, waiting for the pain to make sense. And in that life continues to move without you. Power returns when you choose not to wait anymore. That doesn't mean you dismiss what happened or pretend it didn't matter. It means you stop assigning someone else the authority to determine when you get to heal. You take that authority back. One of the hardest parts of this process is grieving the fantasy of who you thought the other person was. The version of them that was safe, honest, or capable of showing up differently. Letting go of that fantasy can feel like a second loss. But holding on to it keeps you stuck in hope that's no longer aligned with reality. Healing requires clarity, not hope rooted in denial. Another uncomfortable truth is this. Even if they did apologize, even if they explained themselves perfectly, it wouldn't erase what happened. It wouldn't undo the nights you spent questioning yourself. It wouldn't restore the trust that was broken. Closure doesn't reverse damage. It simply acknowledges it. And acknowledgement is something you can give yourself. You can say what happened was real. It hurt. And it mattered. You don't need anyone else to validate that experience. The moment you stop seeking permission to feel what you feel, you take a step toward freedom. There's also power in understanding that some people are unable to give you closure because they never experienced the depth of the connection the same way you did. They didn't lose what you lost. They didn't feel the rupture in the same place. Expecting them to process it with the same gravity keeps you misaligned with reality. Different levels of investment lead to different levels of impact. Releasing the illusion of closure also means letting go of the need to be understood. You may never be able to fully articulate your pain in a way that lands for someone else, and that doesn't make your pain less valid. It simply means not everyone has the capacity to hold it. Stop trying to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Reclaiming your power means redirecting your energy. Instead of asking, why did they do this? You ask, what does this teach me about my boundaries? Instead of wondering, will they ever regret it? You ask, what do I need to feel safe again? The focus shifts from them to you, from the past to the present. And that shift changes everything. You begin to invest in your own clarity. You reflect honestly on what you tolerated, what you ignored, what you need to do differently moving forward, not from a place of self-blame, but from self-respect. You learn to trust your intuition again. You recognize red flags sooner. You choose differently. That is closure. Closure is not a conversation, it's a conclusion. It's the moment you decide that your peace is more important than being right, understood, or validated by someone who is no longer part of your life. It's choosing to stop reopening the wound in search of answers that heal you. Reclaiming your power doesn't happen all at once. It happens in quiet decisions, not checking their social media, not rereading old messages, not reaching out just to see. Each of those choices strengthens your emotional independence. And with that independence comes relief. You start to feel your energy return. Your thoughts become less consumed. Your emotional landscape becomes less reactive. The past loosens its grip, not because it's forgotten, but because it no longer dictates your present. You realize that you don't need closure to move forward. You need courage, the courage to accept what is, the courage to let go of what isn't, and the courage to build a life that isn't defined by something that ended, but by everything that's still possible. That's how you release the illusion of closure, and that's how you reclaim your power. After you've been hurt deeply, there's a natural instinct to protect yourself at all costs. You become more alert, more cautious. You watch people closely. You measure words, tone, intent. This isn't weakness. It's your nervous system trying to keep you safe after learning that pain can come from places you didn't expect. But protection, when driven by fear instead of wisdom, slowly turns into isolation. You tell yourself you're just being careful, that you're done being vulnerable, that you won't let anyone get close enough to hurt you again. And at first, a distance feels like relief. The chaos quiets, the risk decreases, you feel more in control, but over time, something else starts to happen. You stop letting joy in along with the pain. Emotional armor is meant to protect you in battle, not to be worn forever. When it stays on too long, it becomes a prison. You move through life guarded but disconnected, safe but unfulfilled, untouched, also unseen. Healing is not about tearing down your defenses completely, it's about refining them. There is a difference between boundaries and walls. Boundaries are intentional. They allow you to decide who has access to you and under what conditions. Walls are reactive. They block everyone, including the people who mean no harm. Boundaries are flexible, walls are rigid, one is built from self-respect. The other from fear. Becoming hardened is what happens when pain goes unexamined. When you don't process it, it hardens into distrust. You start assuming people will disappoint you. You expect betrayal before connection. You stay one step removed so you don't have to feel the risk of being fully present. That may protect you from hurt, but it also keeps you from healing. Emotional when built correctly, doesn't make you cold. It makes you discerning. You don't close your heart, you train it. You learn to observe how people behave over time instead of falling for words or potential. You notice consistency. You pay attention to how someone responds when things are uncomfortable, not just when they're easy. Wisdom replaces naivety. You stop overgiving to earn love. You stop explaining yourself excessively. You stop trying to be chosen by people who haven't shown the capacity to choose you. These aren't signs of bitterness, they're signs of growth. Another part of emotional armor is learning how to regulate yourself when old triggers appear. Being hurt deeply leaves imprints. Certain tones, silences, or behaviors can instantly transport you back to the moment. You were wounded. Hardening happens when you react from those triggers without awareness. Armor is awareness. It's the ability to pause when something stirs inside you and ask, is this the present moment or is this the past resurfacing? That pause is powerful. It keeps you from projecting old pain onto new people. It allows you to respond instead of react. Without that awareness, people often punish the present for the sins of the past. You don't heal by making everyone pay for what one person did. True emotional strength is not about being unaffected. It's about being grounded. You still feel, you still care, but you are no longer thrown off balance by every emotional shift. You can hold discomfort without collapsing or shutting down. That stability comes from knowing yourself. Owning your limits, knowing your values, knowing what you will and won't tolerate. When you are clear on those things, you don't need to be aggressive or defensive. You don't need to test people or keep score. You simply observe and choose accordingly. Hardened people often mistake numbness for strength, but numbness is just unprocessed pain in disguise. It dulls everything, including love, Identity and connection. Over time, it leaves people feeling empty even if they're surrounded by others. Armor allows feeling, hardening shuts it down. Another critical part of building emotional armor is learning to trust slowly, not withholding trust completely, but allowing it to grow in proportion to someone's actions. Trust doesn't have to be all or nothing. It can be earned in layers. People show you who they are in small moments long before they do in big ones. Pay attention. When you trust in increments, betrayal doesn't shatter you. It informs you. It tells you where to adjust, not who to become. You don't internalize it as a flaw in yourself. You recognize it as information about the other person. That distinction keeps your heart open and intact. Armor also means giving yourself permission to walk away without guilt. After being hurt, many people over-explain their boundaries because they're afraid of being seen as cold or difficult. But protecting your emotional well-being doesn't require justification. You don't owe access to your inner world to anyone who hasn't proven they can handle it with care. Walking away quietly is not weakness, it's restraint. The goal is not to eliminate pain from your life. That's impossible. The goal is to develop the capacity to experience pain without being consumed by it, to allow connection without losing yourself, to love without abandoning your standards. That's emotional maturity. When you build armor instead of walls, you remain soft where it matters and strong where it counts. You can laugh freely, love deeply, and still protect your peace. You don't become cynical. You become selective. And over time, you realize something important. The pain didn't make you smaller. It didn't ruin your ability to connect. It taught you how to value yourself at a deeper level. It showed you the cost of giving too much to the wrong people and the power of giving appropriately to the right ones. That's not hardening. That's evolution. You don't close your heart because you were hurt. You strengthen it so it can remain open without breaking again in the same way. And that's how you move forward with wisdom, not fear. There comes a point in healing when the pain no longer feels as sharp, but it still lingers. It's quieter now, more reflective than overwhelming. And in that space, a question begins to surface. Not loudly, not urgently, but persistently. What do I do with everything this experience gave me? Because pain leaves behind more than scars. It leaves awareness, depth, perspective. It strips illusions and exposes truth. And while no one chooses suffering willingly, there is a choice in what you do after it changes you. Pain, when left unattended, turns inward. It becomes bitterness, withdrawal, or regret. But when it is examined, understood, and integrated, it transforms into something else entirely. It becomes purpose. Purpose doesn't mean you're grateful for what happened. It means you refuse to let it be meaningless. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is moving from asking, "Why did this happen to me?" to "What did this teach me?" The first question keeps you anchored in helplessness. The second opens the door to agency. It places you back in the position of someone who can choose how this chapter influences the next one. Pain has a way of sharpening perception. You see people more clearly. You recognize patterns sooner. You sense when something is off, even if you can't explain it yet. That awareness is not paranoia. It's earned intelligence. And when you trust it, it keeps you aligned with what feels right instead of what feels familiar. Purpose often begins there. You start to notice that your tolerance for shallow connections has decreased. Your desire for authenticity has increased. You don't want surface-level conversations or relationships built on convenience. You want substance. You want honesty. You want alignment. That shift isn't accidental. It's the result of knowing what misalignment costs. Another way pain transforms into purpose is through empathy. When you've experienced deep hurt, you recognize it in others. You hear it in their pauses, see it in their guardedness, sense it in the way they hold back. You become more patient, more compassionate, not because you're weak, but because you understand how heavy unseen battles can be. That kind of empathy has weight. It changes how you show up. As a friend, a partner, a leader, a parent. You listen differently. You respond with more intention. You stop assuming and start observing, and in doing so, you create spaces where others feel safe to be real. That is purpose in action. Pain also clarifies your values. It draws hard lines where there used to be blurred ones. You stow P. Compromising on things that once seemed negotiable. Respect matters more. Consistency matters more. Emotional safety matters more. And when your values become clear, your decisions become simpler, even if they're not easier. You stop chasing what drains you. You stop entertaining what destabilizes you. You stop shrinking to maintain connections that cost you your peace. Purpose doesn't always look like grand gestures or public impact. Sometimes it looks like living differently, choosing healthier dynamics, modeling boundaries, breaking cycles. That's how generational patterns end. Another transformation happens when you realize that your pain has given you credibility, not in a performative way, but in a grounded one. You don't speak from theory anymore. You speak from lived experience. When you offer advice, it carries weight. When you encourage someone, it feels real. When you say, "I understand," you mean it. People are drawn to that kind of authenticity. And at some point, you may find yourself helping others, not because you're healed completely, but because you're honest about the process. You show that strength isn't the absence of pain, it's the willingness to move forward with it consciously. Your story becomes a bridge, not something you broadcast, but something you use when it matters. Purpose also shows up as resilience. You begin to trust your ability to survive difficult things. That trust changes how you approach the future. You're less afraid of uncertainty because you've already been through instability and come out the other side. You know that, Eve. If things fall apart, you can rebuild. That confidence isn't loud, it's quiet and steady. And it's rooted in evidence. Transforming pain into purpose also means allowing yourself to outgrow who you were. Pain often marks the end of a version of you that no longer fits. Holding on to that version out of nostalgia or fear only keeps you stuck. Growth requires release. You don't owe loyalty to who you used to be. As you evolve, your interests change, your goals shift, your standards rise. You may feel misunderstood by people who knew you before the pain. That's okay. Purpose doesn't require universal approval. It requires alignment. At its core, transforming pain into purpose is about meaning-making. It's about refusing to let suffering be the final word. It's about taking what hurt you and using it as fuel for clarity, compassion, and conscious living. You don't become defined by what broke you. You become defined by what you built afterward. The pain becomes part of your foundation, not the whole structure, but the layer that made everything else stronger. It reminds you of your depth, your endurance, your capacity to feel and still move forward. And one day, without forcing it, you realize something profound. What once felt like the end of you quietly became the beginning of a life lived with intention, not because the pain was necessary, but because you were resilient enough to transform it. That is purpose, not loud, not performative, but deeply, unmistakably yours. There is a moment in every healing journey when you realize something has changed. Not the past, it's still there. Not the memory, it still exists, but you are no longer the same person who was broken by it. And that is the victory. You don't heal by going back to who you were before the pain. That version of you didn't have the strength you carry now. Healing is not about erasing scars, it's about standing tall with them and refusing to let them dictate your future. What hurt you did not ruin you, it revealed you. It showed you your capacity to feel deeply, to survive loss, to endure disappointment without disappearing. It forced you to learn boundaries, discipline, discernment, and self-respect, lessons that comfort never teaches. You are not behind. You are not weak for still feeling it. You are not broken because it took time. Healing is not linear, strength is not loud, and growth is often invisible to everyone except you. But here's the truth that matters most. What happened to you does not get to decide how the rest of your life unfolds. You decide. Every day you choose not to let bitterness lead. Every day you choose awareness over reaction. Every day you choose purpose over pain. That is power. And one day you will look back, not with anger, not with regret, but with clarity. You'll see that the moment you thought broke you was the moment you stopped living unconsciously. It was the moment you began to choose yourself. So don't rush the process. Don't harden your heart. Don't shrink to stay safe. Stand steady, stay intentional, keep moving forward, because the strongest version of you is not the one who was never hurt. It's the one who was hurt deeply and rose anyway.